Hi there, it's Tuesday, the 7th of April, and I'm very happy that you're here because you get to listen to my conversation with Ron Insana, former CNBC, now MS Now. He's been a contributor for a long time there, a financial advisor, and a great educator, commentator, informer through the media for years. Ron's become a good friend, and I always enjoy our conversations. We talked about what will happen if this 8 p.m. deadline threat of our absolutely, totally mad, everybody's calling for the 25th Amendment on him leader decides to bomb infrastructure and bridges and follow through with his unhinged Easter Sunday threat. Ron and I talked about that and so much more. I think you're going to love that conversation. If you want to jump to it and skip headlines and my clip show, then it starts at 36 minutes into today's show. But I am glad that you didn't do that. I'm glad that you stayed because I've got some great clips for you and all kinds of news headlines, and it takes a lot to put this together. So I am glad that you are listening to it and appreciate it. Grateful to have you here and excited to see so many of you out in Vegas this Thursday. If we're not obliterated or vaporized by then we are going to have a great time at Podjam 3. Hope to see you there. If you got any questions or you want to join us virtually, you should. That'll be great. There's a virtual ticket and you can join via Zoom to watch the podcast tapings, and maybe we'll go live at one of the parties that we're having, which will be many and other places. For those who hold virtual tickets, go to the link that I have in the show notes. Click there and it'll take you directions, and then we will send you the Zoom link and you will join us virtually. If you have any questions about any of it, email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com. Okay. Well, that's all the announcements. That's the opening. This is an ad-free show, so all I do is plugs to support it with your money. Please sign up for a paid subscription. Check your credit card to make sure that it's active as well, because many of them expired at the end of March. So please make sure that you are in good standing. That is a important part of me running this show, this community, this organization that I've created that so many of you have supported for so long. You can also always pay more if you want and upgrade your pledge at patreon.com/PeteDominic, or you can now get a paid subscription at Substack if you prefer that platform and functionality. Substack at Stand Up with Pete. And so that is it. Those are the plugs. Thank you for being here. And now let's get to those headlines and clips, starting with, of course, the latest from the Middle East. Well, we have a madman as a president, a real, true, textbook, crazy madman, and even the craziest people in MAGA are calling for the 25th Amendment, including Alex Jones and Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I've got clips from coming up, believe it or not. And the madman has set a deadline that Iran must open the Strait of Hormuz by 8 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday or face the consequences. Of course, he's delayed and caved and chickened out in so many previous deadlines. So hopefully that's exactly what he's going to do here, because as we learned from so many experts, the consequences that would happen to the Iranian citizenship, civilians, could be catastrophic. I mean, they could die of thirst because they couldn't get any water. And obviously things less worse, but still horrible. His deadline drawing closer, no sign of a diplomatic breakthrough, and oil prices jumping as the deadline draws near. According to the New York Times, oil prices pushed higher today after he rejected the ceasefire proposal put forth by mediators as not good enough, and his Tuesday evening deadline deal approaches. Yesterday, of course, there was a crazy unhinged press conference where Trump was joined by Hegseth, as well as the head of the CIA and the head of the Joint Chiefs. Hegseth likened the Easter rescue of the U.S. airmen to the resurrection of Jesus Christ, so that was totally normal. And I recap a little bit more about what happened, or at least my characterization of what happened in yesterday's little press conference in my appearance on Australian TV coming up in the clip show, which you're not going to want to miss, because I went on TV with a paper bag on my head that had eye holes and it just said American on it, and they got a good chuckle out of that. Okay, back to the Middle East. The Central Command, which is responsible for U.S. military operations in the Middle East and is leading the attacks on Iran, said that its forces have attacked more than 13,000 Iranian targets. In Israel, an Iranian missile attack on a residential base in the port city of Haifa killed at least 4 people. Reports of drone strikes and missile attempted strikes have been coming from Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. And apparently one attack on Saudi Arabia was catastrophically successful. An overnight attack hit a Saudi petrochemical complex after similar attacks in Iran. It's the Sabik plant in Jubail, and there's a lot of reporting on this because this is a essential plant and a very bad thing, sending shockwaves through global markets and raising fears of a major disruption to supply chains. The strike is seen as a direct hit on Saudi Arabia's economic heart, as Sabik plays a crucial role in global manufacturing, from plastics and fertilizers to essential industrial militaries used worldwide. So a significant strike there in Saudi Arabia. All right, those are the headlines that I've got. The latest on the war in Iran, started by Israel and the U.S. about 5 weeks ago. So let's come back here and talk about a few other things that are happening in the news. Lots of headlines about NASA's Artemis 2 mission, which made history yesterday by sending humans farther from Earth than ever before. And they went behind or around the moon and lost connection for a while, and then made reconnection, and then ignored the president when he called them in space. The 4 astronauts aboard the Orion spacecraft were on a path taking them with about 4,070 miles of the moon's surface, nearly 252,000 miles from Earth. And they, of course, broke Apollo 13's record of 248,655 miles set in 1970. Artemis 2 will begin its return to Earth after lunar observations conclude, and it's on its way back. The vessel expected to splash down off San Diego Friday evening. And today is a special election runoff in Georgia's deep red 14th congressional district. 2 military veterans, one of which joined me right here on the show, the Democrat Jon Harris, are going at it in this runoff. They're running to replace the former Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene. And these 2 candidates find themselves with differing views on the ongoing Iran war. So one could expect that to absolutely animate voters at the ballot box today in the special election runoff, that it will serve as the first glimpse into the role of the war in Iran. And very unlikely that Jon Harris will win, according to all the analysis that I've seen in this district. But if he did, it would be, absolutely shocking and huge. So good luck to everybody down there in the 14th congressional district of Georgia. We'll be watching those returns come in tonight if the world doesn't end by 8 p.m. New reporting from NBC News that U.S. Marshals waived training rules for Elon Musk's armed Doge security members, according to emails. The U.S. Marshals allowed some members of Musk's security team to sidestep experience and training requirements, according to emails gotten by reporters David Ingram and Ryan Riley over at NBC News. Big story, and it'll go undercovered, so wanted to mention that one. Good reporting from those guys, as always. And the Chicago Tribune is reporting that the Trump Truth Store, which is an actual retail brick-and-mortar outlet in Chicago, apparently has temporarily closed on account of low sales amid the Iran war. It was in Crystal Lake, the Chicago suburb. Do you guys know that? Willpower, Chicago people. Well, sorry, you're not going to be able to buy your Trump gear because it's shut down because they weren't making any money because of the war and because of what has happening to gas prices, and that everybody is seeing how horrific this is more each and every day, it would seem. A new Fox News poll actually says that rising health care costs are the most important domestic issue and concerns Americans more than anything else. Americans concerned with the rising cost of healthcare along with the surging insurance premiums. A Gallup poll released last week. I don't know why I said Fox News poll. Okay, this is a Gallup poll that found healthcare is the top domestic issue facing Americans among 16 policy areas, including in the survey with 61% say they worry a great deal about healthcare access and affordability. Count me, and I'm sure you, as one of those people. Those findings are similar to those of a recent Fox News poll, which found that 81% of voters are either extremely or very concerned about healthcare, a figure which trailed only inflation and high prices. So that clears it up. There was a Fox News poll. There's a Gallup poll. There's 2 polls. There's more polls. Healthcare is the top domestic policy concern of Americans. And I'm not even sure we needed a poll to know that. A new singer is dominating the iTunes and other music charts, and it's not a real person. It's an AI-generated new singer dominating the iTunes charts, taking over, and that's terrifying and upsetting. And I'm not even going to mention the name that this person made up for this AI singer, because I don't want him to get any more traction or listens. You'll figure it out, but that was pretty upsetting to hear. Oh, but here's a fun story. Strangers have raised $76,000 for a delivery driver who just exceeded expectations, went above and beyond, because there are these two disabled people and they get home delivery a lot. And while the delivery driver didn't know that they were disabled, and they had ordered a Diet Coke, they didn't have any at the store. So he stopped at a store and got a Diet Coke. And these people told his story, and then somehow someone decided to raise money because he had been working at Domino's for 14 years as a second job and was about to retire. Anyway, fundraisers already raised $76,000 for the guy. I don't know. I like these random acts of kindness where they raise money and reward good behavior. I think it's fun, and I'm okay with it. I don't know if there's any ethical issue that I should have about it, but I liked it, and I wanted to share it with you as a happy news story of humanity after I told you all those horrific things, which are all aberrations and exceptions. That's why they're news. Remind yourself of that. I have to, so I can get through this news segment as I produce it each and every day. But now let's get to those clips that I've got for you. First, I like to start on laughs whenever possible and end on them as well. So let's do that with the clip show. First, Kimmel was off last week, but he was back and he was great.
And then yesterday on Easter Sunday, of all the days, we woke up to this. Tuesday will be Power Plant Day and Bridge Day, all wrapped up in one in Iran. There will be nothing like it. Open the straight, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell. Just watch. Praise be to Allah, President Donald J. Trump. I believe that's a letter from Paul to the Corinthians. You know, we've heard the word unhinged a lot this weekend, probably more than any weekend ever, but I just want you to imagine. Let me set the scene, okay? You're finishing your Easter brunch, cleaning up, the kids are running out to the yard to find jelly beans, and suddenly your 79-year-old grandpa stands up and he yells, "Open the straight, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell. Just watch. Praise be to Allah." You'd put him in the car, drive him straight to the emergency room, right? I mean, the whole family will be crying. And not the Trumps. Nope. 4 hours later, he posted again an ultimatum. He wrote, "Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern Time." He's the only president who teases a bombing the same way ABC promotes new episodes of Will Trent. And then today he changed that deadline. He said Iran could be taken out by midnight tomorrow, but he didn't specify if that's our tomorrow or their tomorrow. We could start a World War III over a time zone error. Things are running like a Swiss watch, folks. And then
all right, there you go. I love it. There's Kimmel getting us started with some laughs. And now let's go to Alex Jones again. 2 days in a row, I've got to play him, because when a crazy person calls another person crazier, it's always good. But when that crazy person is Alex Jones and he's calling the president crazy, that's really good. I don't know who his guest was, but he thinks he's a goner too.
How do we 25th Amendment his ass?
The problem is to get the 25th Amendment is harder than impeachment. You have to get 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate.
So what do we do?
Tackle Trump and pretend, let him pretend he's president and publicly report that he's going through a health issue and Vance take over. It literally needs to be something like that. It's that bad.
I've known you a long time. You've never called for a internal coup before.
Ever. But that's how dangerous this is. That's how risky it is for the whole world.
Yeah, if I was the Democrats, I'd stop poking Trump and messing with him. That only makes it worse. Like, you guys need to watch out. This isn't a guy acting like he's crazy. This is real.
Well, what's there going to be to take over in 2026 or 2028 if this hits the fan? If we get it, he's threatening an extinction level event for the people of Iran tomorrow. Does nobody think there'll be any blowback from that? If he follows through on that, the whole world is screwed.
Yes, indeed. Listen to them and listen to this. This is Marjorie Taylor Greene talking to Megyn Kelly.
Say, what is happening to the man that I supported? You supported, the man that denounced what happened in Iraq, the man that said no more foreign wars, no more regime change, promised it on the campaign. J.D. Vance promised it. Tulsi Gabbard promised it. All of them promised it. And we're a year in, and we're in another fucking war, and we've got American troops being killed. I think it's time for America to rip the Band-Aid off, and we need to have a serious conversation about what the fuck is happening to this country and who in the hell are these decisions being made for, and who is making these decisions.
Yes. Oh, I love it. And I hate it. Obviously, I hate it all. But then also I like that. Here's the great Lawrence O'Donnell on MS Now last night.
This is why the 25th Amendment was written. It was ratified in 1967, authorizing the vice president and a majority of the cabinet to remove the president from power when and if that president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office. The 25th Amendment was written for the day when the Democratic leader of the United States Senate could credibly say, quote, "The president is ranting like an unhinged madman," as he said yesterday. It was impossible to imagine, back when they wrote the 25th Amendment, it was impossible for them to imagine a day with the President of the United States ranting like an unhinged madman, until Donald Trump took the oath of office. The 25th Amendment was written for the day when a former Republican member of Congress who voted for that Republican president 3 times would declare to the world, he has gone insane. The 25th Amendment was written for yesterday at 8:03 a.m. That's what Donald Trump delivered his Easter greeting to the world, that included a promise to commit war crimes on Tuesday night. The 25th Amendment was written for this. Most of you have seen this profane and perverse social media post. I am not going to read it, as is customary for such exhibits introduced on TV news programs, because it is pure warmongering, filthy madness. We can put it back up on the full screen for anyone who hasn't read it to actually finish reading it right now. I will not use it as an opportunity for audiences to get to hear another anchorman using the dirty word. I will not read Donald Trump's poison aloud because it is beneath my dignity, and that's not a phrase I use very often. And we should all be deeply concerned about living in a country where an anchorman's dignity, indeed the dignity of anyone, anywhere in the country, on any television show, is much, much higher than the dignity of the depraved president of the United States. But that is where we are tonight.
That is where we are tonight. And it was morning in Australia when I joined the Today Show and talked to the anchors Dickie and Lizzie. My friend David Campbell was hosting their big morning show even before that this time. And so I talked to these other anchors who, one of them knows me, the other one I don't know. But either way, I started the segment with a paper bag on my head. This is 4 minutes. It starts with the anchors. You will hear just a couple seconds of Orange Schittler, and then we jump into it and have a nice fun ride.
Welcome back. Well, US President Donald Trump has hit out at Australia and NATO this morning for their apparent lack of action in the war with Iran.
It's not just NATO. You know who else didn't help us? South Korea didn't help us. You know who else didn't help us? Australia didn't help us. You know who else didn't help us? Japan.
There you go, the president lashing out at us. Political commentator and comedian Pete Dominic joins us now live from, I think it's Pete, they're live from New York City. Come on, Pete, it's okay. We know you're in there, son. Come out, it's all okay. All is forgiven. Oh, goodness me. Very funny, Pete. His disdain was pretty clear. What did you make of this address?
Dickie, Lizzie, it's great to see you. I hope that you have a guest room for my family and I. It was absolute madness. Today he played his best classic gaslighter in chief. We call him Gasolini now. He did all his favorite cartoon villain tricks and bits. He lied. He made up stories and conversations that never happened with military members. He threatened reporters and all of our foreign country friends, by which I mean you. He called out Australia twice. He said, Australia didn't help us. And also he can distract us from this war of choice, from his relationship with his old best friend, Jeffrey Epstein, guys.
He did mention Australia a couple of times. He also mentioned Japan a few times. What does this mean for Australia's relationship with the US, do you think, Pete?
You tell me. Yeah. I mean, I think what Australia and Spain and the UK and most of the EU have done is the right thing. I mean, you shouldn't be supporting America and Israel's war in Iran. I mean, it's a terrible thing. So Australia is doing the right thing. I mean, I want to thank Australia, and on behalf of most Americans, all of the countries who did not join this horrible war of choice, which he set a crazy deadline for. We haven't yet talked about his crazy Easter Sunday threats. And tomorrow at this time, we could be doing even more damage in Iran, destroying the country, he says. Yeah, well, on that, I mean, he has made threats and set deadlines before, but he has warned that he's going to, quote, wipe out Iran's infrastructure if a deal to end the war isn't reached, by kind of this time tomorrow, 24 hours. This is a big game he's playing here, isn't it? Yeah, and we're hoping that he does what we call TACO, the acronym for Trump always chickens out or caves in. But, I mean, he's acting like this bargain basement Marvel Universe Thanos talking about we're going to rain hell on your country. Who talks that way? He's offended 25% of the world when he offended all these Muslims on our Easter Sunday. And he then talked about how much of a hero he is for saving a downed airman, which was terrible. It'd be like me pushing you down a hill, Dickie, and then going down on a rope and saving you and calling myself your savior. Yeah, don't do that, please, Pete. No.
Now, Pete, let's talk about this expletive-laden post on Truth Social yesterday. There was F-bombs, there was the B word. Iran has since mocked this post that was put up. How's it gone down in the US?
Terribly. We're terribly embarrassed. We're scared. Every hour, it's like on a knife's edge, especially with all of these threats. We always thought these theocrats, these mullahs in Iran were the crazy ones, the crazy religious ones. It turns out our own Secretary of Defense is just as religiously crazy. And our own president says the type of things that Iranians have been saying for 45 years, but worse and even more threatening, and with the military to back it up. So we're scared. We're nervous. We're embarrassed. We're humiliated. And we know that this has already created so much damage that it's going to take us a long time to repair. So, again, get that guest room ready. He's presumably surrounded by, people in the Oval Office who are encouraging him or egging him on. Do you think he has people around him who are, voices of moderation or not? No, and when he does, he fires them. There were many military leaders who disagreed, pushed back, and they got rid of them. They get rid of them. They push them out of the room. They no longer have access to our dear leader if they disagree with him. They're sycophants or they're not working for him. The only thing that matters is what he thinks about and how he wants to handle things that day, and he has no plans whatsoever. He said the Strait of Hormuz, remember, like COVID, he goes, it's just going to go away naturally, everything will be fine. So no, he's listening to no one but his own crazy mind. Yeah. We sit and wait. Pete, thanks for your time. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me, guys. Cheers.
All right, there you go. Hope you enjoyed that. You can watch it. I posted it everywhere as well, of course. Always a fun time. And now let's go to, who's this? The former governor of New Jersey.
Which doesn't mean wisdom.
At Harvard's Kennedy School.
Real lack of principles is on display every day in the House of Representatives and the United States Senate. These people have become lemmings. They only do what he tells them to do. And not only that, they don't even criticize him when he deserves to be criticized. He put out a post yesterday, which I'm sure many of you saw. And I was going to say exactly what he said. He said, you better open up the fucking strait, you crazy bastards. Now, look, I'm from New Jersey. So you could tell that language flowed pretty easily for me. But come on, man. Like, this is, Coach Amaker knows. He coached at Seton Hall. He understands. But come on. There's not one Republican, not one, who I've seen in the last 24 hours who says, okay, come on now. That's enough. Even something as simple as that, Mr. President, those words on Easter Sunday were ill-advised. They can't even do that. They're scared to do that. Because here's why, and this is where the principles come in. They care more about the title than they do about doing the job they have. The best example of this right now in the 535 members of the United States Congress is Lindsey Graham. This is a man who only cares about his title. Nothing else. Absolutely nothing else. He is a vapid, vacant human being. And for him to say the things that he has said about Donald Trump in the past, and all he wants to do is suck up and play another round of golf and pray that he gets the endorsement for the United States Senate. You know, lots of people in my party will say, oh, you know, it isn't the way it used to be and people lack principles. You got to say the names if you really want to be credible on this. And there's a bunch of other ones that I'll probably say during this hour tonight. But Graham is the first one. And the reason is because a guy who was a hard-edged politician but had some principles was John McCain. And John McCain mentored Lindsey Graham. He saw him as like a son. John McCain, I can guarantee you, is spinning in his grave watching Lindsey Graham suck up to Donald Trump. And so I'm disgusted by what my party looks like in Washington. And what's it mean for the midterms? You know, probably nothing. What's going to control the midterms is that people right now are giving Donald Trump 27.72 approval ratings on inflation and 31.65 approvals on the economy. If those numbers are anywhere close to that come October, it's over. They're going to lose both houses.
All right. Governor Chris Christie at Harvard yesterday being pretty straightforward as usual, and still don't like him. All right. And now I want to play for you. I forgot this one. This is Tucker Carlson. Should have added this to the Marjorie Taylor Greene, Alex Jones, and other montage. His reaction to our madman's post on Easter Sunday.
Who do you think you are? You're tweeting out the F word on Easter morning? You'll be living in hell. Just watch. Praise be to Allah. So obviously you're mocking the religion of Iran. Okay. If you seek a religious war, that's a good idea. But by the way, no decent person mocks other people's religions. You may have a problem with the theology. Presumably you do if it's not your religion, and you can explain what that is. But to mock other people's faith is to mock the idea of faith itself. And we should never mock that, because at its core is the acknowledgement that we are not in charge of the universe. We did not build it. We won't be here at the end of it. We can destroy life. We cannot create it because we are not God. The message of all faith at the biggest picture level is the message in our Bible, which is you are not God. And only if you think you are do you talk this way. But it's not just mockery of Islam. And no president should mock Islam. That's not your job. This is not a theocracy. We don't go to war with other theocracies to find out which theocracy is more effective. We are not a theocracy. And God willing, we never will be, because theocracies corrupt the religion.
I mean, I'm sure he's mocked all kinds of religions his whole career, right? He must have gone after Islam over and over, but this is new, very religious anti-Trump Tucker? I don't know. I took out the dramatic pauses. You can thank me for that later. Let's get to Elise Jordan highlighting the fact that J.D. Vance is headed to Hungary to try to support an authoritarian before his election.
In tonight's primetime focus, bailing out an autocrat. It's not every day you see the sitting vice president campaign for a foreign authoritarian leader, but that's what's going to happen this Tuesday when J.D. Vance heads to Hungary to campaign for Viktor Orban in the country's parliamentary elections. A far-right strongman who's led his country for 16 years and whose economic policies caused inflation to nearly hit 25% at one point. And then there's the Russia of it all. Orban has met with Vladimir Putin at least a dozen times. He flew to Moscow while holding the EU's rotating presidency to meet with a man that ICC, International Criminal Court, has indicted for war crimes. The propaganda is so blatant that Orban's government has been putting up posters like these with text that read, "Let's not let Zelensky have the last laugh." But after 16 years in power, the end might be coming for Orban. Most reliable polls show his party is facing an uphill battle against the opposition candidate. So you might be asking, why is Vance doing this? Why is our government trying to elect a far-right strongman while we're on the precipice of disaster with Iran?
Yes, all good questions, Elise Jordan. Now let's go to another, an expert. She's an expert on authoritarianism and the former Soviet Union. You probably know her from The Atlantic. Anne Applebaum. She was on MS Now with Morning Joe, who's an idiot.
Look at what Hungary has become. So Viktor Orban has been in charge of Hungary on this time around 16 years. During that time, he has used his power as a democratically elected leader to change the nature of the Hungarian political system. He has taken over the institutions of the state. He's taken over the judiciary, the media, the bureaucracy, universities. And thanks to that, and thanks to the unbelievably high level of corruption that's been the result, Hungary is poorer. It's now one of the poorest countries in the European Union. It's certainly the most corrupt country in the European Union. And it's has problems with healthcare, education. He's not even talking about any of that during the campaign. Instead, he's weaved this kind of mythical fantasy about an invasion from Ukraine, that the Ukrainians are going to invade Hungary. He's trying to create a kind of scare thing. I was in Budapest 3 weeks ago. There are posters of Zelensky all over the city with the headline, with the slogan, "Don't let him get the last laugh." And he's not winning. I mean, he's certainly in the opinion polls, and there's a wide range of them. He's well behind in some of the polls, about 20% behind. And now the only question is whether what he will do to either halt the election or change the result or create some kind of outrage.
All right. There you go. Yes. That's all very important about Orban, so I wanted to include that. And now some comedy. Let's go to comedian Daniel Sloss, who I love, Scottish comedian. You got to see this as well as hear it. It's a little funnier because he's pretending to be holding guns and holding the front, liberals versus conservatives, civil war. Anyway, I thought it was great. Here he is.
All the time I do wish I was right wing. Looks so easy because the right wing don't really care how right wing you are. They're just happy you joined in. Do you love Trump? Yeah, love Trump. Do you hate abortion? Yeah, hate abortion. Do you hate the gays? Oh, not really. You'll learn. That's it. If you are not as left-wing as the left-wing person you are talking to, you are the enemy, man. They say they're being like, are you anti-Trump? Yeah, I'm anti-Trump. Are you pro-choice? Yeah, I'm pro-choice. Are you pro-LGBTQ? Yes, I'm pro-LGBTQ. Are you anti-racist? Yes, I'm anti-racist. Are you a vegan? No? Then why don't you go join the rest of the fucking Nazis? It is exhausting. Being left-wing, it's kind of like being in the fucking trenches, right? And the enemy, they outnumber you. They're better organized and they're winning. And you just sat there in the trenches and be like, oh my God, they outnumber, oh God, how the hell are we going to beat these cunts? Why did you say cunts? What? It's just interesting that you chose to say cunts. I don't think that's important right now. When will it be important? When this is done! There's a literal fucking Nazi! Like, can we focus on other things, please?
Very, very funny. Daniel Sloss. All right, like it. Go watch his new special. And now, finally, J.L. Covan did his Trump impression and posted this clip about the, it explains itself pretty well. Very funny. J.L. will join us in Vegas. He's on a train there now, I think, because he doesn't fly, which is hilarious and sad. Here he is.
And we're going to blow up bridges, We're going to blow up bridges. We're going to first make an example of Todd Bridges from Different Strokes, because I never liked him. I always thought he was trying to steal the spotlight from What You Talking About, Willis, the little one, the little chubby one. And so we're going to take out Todd Bridges, then we're going to take out every bridge game. Old women. Pete Hegseth says no more rules. Pete Hegseth says he's the Outback Steakhouse of Administrative Assistants of War, not secretary, that's feminine. He says no rules, just right wing. And I like that. I think that's going to be sort of our motto, but we're going to blow up bridges, Todd Bridges, games of bridge, every bridge that has a car on it. Any child playing London Bridge is falling down. We're going to have no mercy. And then we're going to blow up every energy source they have. And they're going to do it because when you're a celebrity, they don't know the rules, but when you're a celebrity president, you can make countries do whatever you want. And we're going to make them do it. We're going to make them do it, or else we won't. And I think I just left a big 3 in my pants.
I can't wait to see JL performing live for us in Vegas on Friday night at Podjam 3. All right, now it's time to get to my guest. He is a great financial analyst, and he's been at it for a long time. I'm sure you've seen him on television and any of the networks of NBC, CNBC, and NBC, as well as MSNBC and now MS News, where he's a regular contributor, finance reporter, author, former hedge fund manager. Check him out on Instagram and Blue Sky and Threads, and most importantly, check out his new Substack. Go subscribe to Ron Insana's Substack. It's called The Message of the Markets, and Ron and I caught up live yesterday. You can watch this on YouTube or Substack and other places as well that we were live. Thank you for those of you who watched it then, and I am happy to have you, the rest of you, listening to it now. Ron and I talked for a while before I pressed record, so I just wanted to continue that conversation, which was somewhat personal in nature, just about men and aging and midlife crisis. So we started with that, and then we got to the issues of the day and markets and more. Well, it's not exactly cable television. He's slumming it with me. Takes off the tie. He sits down in front of that same bookcase. The great, the legend, Ron Insana is here, and I'm so excited to see you, my friend. We already started getting deep before we even hit record.
We really hit on a lot of life issues, didn't we?
We have a connection.
Yes, we do.
I don't know what
similar ethnic backgrounds.
That's right.
We're not the same age, but we're close.
Family men. You have 3. I have 2.
Yeah.
And you, can I say that you just celebrated a milestone?
Sure. I had 2 of them, actually. It was 30 years of marriage last November and then a birthday last week.
Well, congratulations on a wonderful relationship, or on a, what are you supposed to say? A successful marriage? You know, I'm separated, and to everybody whose marriage ended, I got caught up in saying at first my marriage failed, but my ex-wife and I like to talk about how successful our marriage was in terms of we raised these 2 amazing young women and so many other things. We had a great life in a lot of ways. But you know, there's all these expectations, but people say, when you've been married as long as you have, or my parents have been married 55 years, like, congratulations, you're better than us.
No, not at all. Listen, I mean, everybody goes through the same stuff, right? I mean, it's like, you know, it's funny. Not funny. After my father passed away when I was 35, I for the first time in my life went through therapy, and you know that affected me, which in turn affected my marriage, and you know, and so on and so forth. And my therapist at the time said, you know, marriage is about committing and recommitting every single day until you do or you don't. And so everybody's going through the same stuff. You know, everybody has either a point that they get through or a point where they stop. And there's no judgment. I mean, it is what it is, right? I mean, it can work or it won't. And there are times for everybody where it feels like it's not going to. And sometimes you get the right help, sometimes you don't. And sometimes, you're able to clear that hurdle and forge ahead. We got lucky in that regard that we were able to do that.
You went to therapy for one purpose. It sounds like the grief over losing your dad, which is hard for anyone, really hard, depending on your relationship, obviously. But you end up discovering other things in your life. That's what happens when you go to therapy. Yeah. I actually first went to therapy when I was a 24-year-old man. And I went because I thought it would be a good way for me to mine my life for material, because I was stumped I had a writer's block. I didn't know what to write. My life wasn't that interesting. I was like, let me go deep with it there. But I ended up opening all kinds of doors and committed to therapy on and off throughout my life. But you said you also just celebrated 65. And I say you should always have a same gender friend older than you, a few years. And I love having people like you in my life because you can tell me kind of what might be coming. You're 65. That's a milestone. Also, for a man, you've already lost. You mentioned a couple of good friends. I mean, like there's so much that you learn at that point in life, and the midlife crisis always comes. It would seem.
I had 3 of them. Are you kidding?
You had 3.
Yeah, I had 3. One after my dad died when I was 35, and I didn't, and we had not, it wasn't an adversarial relationship, but it was a distant relationship that, I think my dad was, to a certain extent, probably a little depressed, disassociated. And so there were a lot of unresolved issues between him and me and my siblings and him as well when he passed. So there was both grief and anger. And then in my mid 40s, I quit my job. Again, was probably going through a few things at home as well. And, you kind of lose your bearings for a little while and you go to therapy and you get them back if it's warranted. And then, look, I think around this time of life, it's funny. When I turned 60, my wife said, it's just a number. And I said, and I used an expletive around that particular description and said, no, it's not. I said, I'm as close to 80 as I am to 40. And so, she's 8.5 years younger than I am. And the clock starts to tick a little differently. And you start to think a little differently and you start to plan life a little bit differently. And so, yeah, you go through, I don't think there's just one midlife crisis, and I'm not like Woody Allen, where I think that life is just a series of unending crises. It's just, you get, some hurdles that you have to cross, at different points along the way.
It depends how you look at it or how you name it or how you call it. And though Buddhism talks about suffering every day and trying to find ways to alleviate that suffering, and life is filled with that. So sometimes it's a lot worse and sometimes it is at a crisis, at a fever pitch. And so, for example, I try to appreciate and have kind of a gratitude journal, at least in my head. Sometimes I write it down, but I just went for a trip with my daughter to Amsterdam, and I'm so grateful that the flights weren't delayed. I'm so grateful that there wasn't another crisis affecting us. It went smoothly. We had a good time. So I've been sitting in gratitude as a result to realize, this is not going to, as you just said, things will fall apart again and again. And so now that you're 65, what advice, before we get to your expertise, which is finance and markets, and this is your expertise too, do you have any kind of practice? Do you have any kind of habits at 65 that you develop that help you deal with the emotional ups and downs and, if you want, crisis?
Listen, I check in. I started serious therapy in my 40s, largely because of a health related issue that was really stress driven. And I still check in with my therapist, who's a brilliant guy. He's a Harvard MD, and he's got a PhD in Tibetan Buddhist studies from Columbia. And so I do, a gut check every other month or, whenever it's required. I'm not doing it on a regular basis anymore because we did quite a number of years together. I think I go back and forth. I mean, obviously, as particularly at this age when you're kind of figuring out what your end game is for the last, I don't want to stop working. So like the last 10 years of my professional life, how do I navigate that? And on the personal side, it's how do I control the reactions that dominated my life for so long, where the ups and downs that you deal with as a younger person, I still get them, but how do you, cut the edges off a little bit? And how do you remember, what it is that you've really built, whether it's a professional reputation or in my case, a personal life where I'm still married to the same woman and happily so 30 years later. And I have 3 kids that, as I say, I have the luxury of liking and loving, which is in some instances unusual. And so that, to me, those 2 things are the single biggest successes in life that I'm grateful for. And so when things really start to, kick my ass, that's kind of what I refocus on.
I love all of that. Let me just ask you, as a way to bridge to talking about what the hell's happening in markets and in the economy, how do you understand or position money and financial wealth in your personal life? Your whole life, you've been advising the rest of us and helping us understand and explaining and teaching and advising. But the wealthiest people in the world, and a lot of people, probably everyone that works in finance, everyone that works in financial media. And as men, we definitely, I'll just go ahead and generalize, think a lot more about money and financial wealth than other types of wealth. And I think a lot about how I define wealth, which has to do with time and health and money. You were talking about your best friend died at a very young age, as my uncle died around the same age of the same disease, a blood cancer, basically. And doesn't matter how much money you have if you can't save your own life or the life of someone that you love. And so it's a wrap. So I define wealth with how much time I have, how much time I'm healthy, and how many people I have that I love, that love me in their life, something around that. All about money and all of the money, and the richest people in the world, and I'm sure you've done well. How do you think about wealth and financial wealth and kind of connecting any kind of definition to it or not allowing it to mislead you as it does a lot of men?
Yeah, look, I think, the days of wanting to be a billionaire have long since passed, right? When you're around all those folks and you're in somebody's house.
That was your ambition for a long time, was to accrue as much.
Not really. I mean,
not to be a billionaire, but to accrue financial wealth, like to get more and more, to have more and more financial wealth was your ambition.
Yeah, you want to fly private. You want to do the things that the guys you're covering are doing at a smaller scale, right? I mean, listen, I worked for a guy who's now worth $24 billion and owns a Major League Baseball team. For a period of time, I was going to his house on a regular basis. He had an art collection that was worth billions of dollars, and you're in the family room, for lack of a better description, and there's a Van Gogh and a Monet and a Jackson Pollock and a Picasso sculpture, and you're sitting there going, holy shit, this is it's just, and then it gets normal after a little while because you're going there so often and you're dealing with these people and everything seems kind of like attainable. And then you realize that a lot of folks aren't all that happy with all that stuff.
Elon Musk recently tweeted his most honest tweet in the world. He's like being rich doesn't make you happy or something like that.
Not even close. Not from a lot of the people I've seen. And, Again, and listen, I've also made financial mistakes, right? I mean, I've made a few bonehead plays along the way. And even with all, the accumulated knowledge doesn't mean wisdom. The accumulated knowledge that I have, covering financial markets, being around people who, are intimately involved with money, it doesn't mean you won't make mistakes. And so I think, you get to a point where, what is it that does literally make you happy? I mean, is it, a boat would not make me happy. A specific car wouldn't make me happy. So the only reason flying private would make me happy is that commercial airline flying sucks. That's the only reason. Yeah. It's not, it's not the desire to have that as an asset. And so I think the stuff that makes me happiest now these days is still, more family driven. It's, my interactions with my kids, my wife. And yeah, listen, you want to be blunt, you want a little FU money in the bank so that you don't have to think about it. But I think, that, and that's a different level for different people. But whatever it is, it just allows to live your life comfortably and without having to, worry about the next paycheck. I think that's
right. Having a certain level of
happier by having listen. If you have $1 billion and you own a baseball team, yeah, it's probably fun. But it doesn't mean you don't have a couple of kids. Or, and I'm not talking about this individual in particular, but it doesn't mean that you don't have problems with your wife, or you don't have problems with your family, or you don't have any of the other stuff that the rest of us go through. Everybody has that. So
if I had all the money in the world, but my daughter hated me, I would just keep trying to give her more money. And she'd be like, Dad, it's not about money.
It's not about money. And I've seen that too, where you do see some people try to, literally paper over the problems, and it doesn't fix it. The only thing that really fixes it is time and intimacy. And listen, in some instances, there are other fixes that are required if you have kids who are suffering through something that is not just run of the mill stuff, but it's about time, it's about relationships, the money's fine and it's important, but we're all going to the same place, right? I mean, so at the end of the day, it's all left behind anyway.
Yeah. The journey should matter though. I felt, and the integrity, hopefully with which you can live it. I felt just privileged to be able to go with my daughter to Europe. I mean, yeah, I used points, but yeah,
don't we all?
We flew economy, but as I was leaving the plane, I did get to walk through first business, then first class. And that alone is a trip. I'm like, who's paying for these seats? My seats were $1,200 a piece. How much are these seats? So I don't even need a private jet. I want to make it into, I don't even need first class. I want that one that reclines all the way. They don't even let you see first class. And somehow we exited the plane and I couldn't believe how much stuff they had. There was like a pouch, like a shaving kit. And then the front seat had a sex doll. That person, they give the people in first class on United a sex robot now, which I was really a disposable one, impressed with.
As it should be. I mean, they haven't come up with the reusable ones yet, as far as I know. Maybe in Japan.
I was shocked at the wealth I saw. Let's talk about what the hell is happening, Ron. I appreciate all of this personal talk, and I want to do a whole podcast with you. But if people want to learn more about everything Ron is writing about, you should go check out his new Substack, which is great. I'm following, I'm watching, I'm reading. It's the name of the Substack is The Message of the Markets, or at Ron Insana. He's been doing this as long and as well as anybody. First,
I just got my Medicare card this month.
Started playing it. If we look back before we get to the war and energy and oil markets, which you're the go-to guy on one of them, I just want to just look back at the economy before this war began, just about 5 weeks ago. And there was a lot of prediction about the havoc, and I think I talked to you about it at the time, that tariffs would cause in the trade war. I think a lot of the analysis was based on the rates that he originally was going to ask, and then he caved on so many things. And that analysis, I think people still hung to and tried to say, well, you were wrong about that. In fact, he caved on a lot of those things because of the analysis. But how bad was or is the trade war that he started and the tariffs that he's instituted? I know, just thinking of a lot of farmers lost their markets and lost their crop, and we had to bail them out. But we could talk about any number of sectors. But before we get to the war, where were we at 5 weeks ago, Ron?
So 5 weeks ago, we were still kind of in this, and Jay Powell, the outgoing chairman of the Fed, doesn't love us using this word, but we were still in sort of a mini stagflation. Inflation was above the Fed's 2% target, hugging close to 3%. The labor market is low hire, low fire, very stagnant at the moment, except for healthcare jobs being created. If you look over the last year since Liberation Day, we've had no net new job creation over that entire year, right? In fact, we've lost jobs in manufacturing. 75,000 have gone since the tariffs.
That's a huge statistic that in a year, no net new hiring. So there were, I think I don't have to explain that to people, but yeah, that's a big deal.
It's zero. It's in fact slightly less than zero, to borrow the title of an old book that I didn't really love. But it's been a very unfulfilling economy in a lot of ways. Now, having said that, consumer spending is still reasonably strong, surprisingly so. But Mark Zandi over at Moody's points out that the top 10% of all wage earners account for 50% of all consumer spending. So you do have that K-shaped economy that people are talking about. If you're on the upside of it, you're doing really well. If you're in the middle, I kind of look at it as an E-shaped economy. If you're in the middle, you're just hugging the line. And if you're down at that lower end of the E, you're falling behind because you've lost ACA subsidies. You're going to lose Medicaid and SNAP, assistance after the midterms. And you're really struggling with prices for groceries, childcare, healthcare, home insurance, car insurance, and things like that are higher payments today than they were a year or so ago, or at least they're holding higher than they were in prior periods. So it's a bit of a struggle for a lot of people, but it's a very uneven distribution of wealth, as we know. Elon Musk is going to become the first trillionaire in history this year. And then you've got other people who can't make the mortgage payment, can't make the car payment, can't get childcare.
Yeah, well explained. So that's where we were, and that's where we are in many ways. And it's really hard to know where we're going because of this. I don't know if we could say, well, everything's unpredictable and uncertain when it comes to life, much less markets. But I don't know which question I want to start with in terms of how this war in Iran has affected the world, because it affects energy. It affects the world. What is the kind of econ 101 or finance 101 on what happens when you start a war with the country who controls so many other countries' pathway to energy, period?
And it's not just energy. It's fertilizer. It's the ingredients for fertilizer. And we're in the spring planting season for farmers, so they're going to get hit again. It's helium, which is used to make semiconductors. So if you're in Taiwan and you're a Taiwan Semiconductor, which makes 90% of all the advanced chips in the world, and you can't get helium, that slows your production. It'll interfere with energy generation, electricity generation in some instances. Japan is reliant on other countries for 90% of its energy imports. China, 50%, 35% of which comes from the Middle East. So you can wreak havoc on manufacturing, on farming, and on prices all at the same time. And so that becomes almost by definition some version, smaller version, albeit, of the 1970s, where you get this stagflationary environment that's felt by everybody. It's not just a kind of a select few at the lower end or middle income levels. Everybody would feel this if the war were to drag on, or if the president does what he threatened to do again today, which is to take out all the civilian infrastructure in Iran, including their electricity generating capacity, which would create a humanitarian crisis in Iran and probably lead to further retaliation. Then you get a major energy spike, you get shortages, and then you get the type of environment, like 1973, 74, that took us all the way into 1980 and 81, where interest rates went up, inflation went up, and the economy stagnated at the same time. It would be the worst of all possible worlds. And we'll have to see. We will find out tomorrow night at 8 o'clock if there's no agreement between now and then, whether he really makes good on a threat that some people consider to be a war crime if he were to engage in it.
And that is the threat to bomb infrastructure and energy production facilities in Iran?
Yeah, I mean, look, if they get here, think about not having electricity, right? And I mean this on a national basis. Iran has no electricity after we bomb all their energy infrastructure, including their power generating stations. That means you can't purify water. It means you can't get gasoline and travel. It means you can't refrigerate your food. You can't get anywhere. You can't communicate because the grid is down. If you take the grid down in a country of 90 million people, you're talking about mass starvation. You're talking about a huge humanitarian crisis for which there would be an obvious retaliation. They would hit even harder the other Gulf states. Kuwait relies on desalination for 90% of its water. You could have a major global conflict here that spins out of control. That is the worst case scenario, of course. And you can't bet on that necessarily, but we've got a little more than 24 hours to figure it out, I guess. Or the president can push the deadline back again, as he has so often done in the past.
Yes, it's really, we're on a real knife's edge, it would seem, right now.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, if it goes wrong, it's going to go. And, I don't live in this world of worst case scenarios, and I'm not a conspiracy freak or any of that stuff. Maybe when I was younger, I had a little more, just a tinge of that in me. I don't always expect the worst case scenario anymore, but this is a very high risk proposition. And, when I was thinking before we came on, the president says, we have a plan. We have a plan. And just reminded me of the scene in Dog Day Afternoon where Al Pacino's being questioned by one of the hostages, like, you didn't have a plan. And he's like, we had a plan. We had a plan. I mean, and that's almost what it sounded like he was saying today. It was like, we have a plan, but we don't really have a plan,
Like journalism would dictate how we analyze this or history, the record, if you will. And when he says he has a plan on something like healthcare is the most infamous one. And he's going to release it in 2 weeks. Like he never does. But I feel like the most ominous thing I heard this madman say was that the Strait of Hormuz, it'll just open up naturally. And I remember the last time I heard him say something would just go away naturally. And that was a deadly virus, which you didn't have to be a scientist to understand how it worked. And you don't have to be a financial expert or a geopolitical foreign policy expert to understand it's not just going to go away. If you understand leverage and a country's interest, it looks like what Iran is doing is making kind of piecemeal deals or even bigger deals with, I heard Keir Starmer has brought together like 30 countries and they're all negotiating with Iran. Is what I'm seeing happening that they're making deals with Iran saying you can come through, you can't. And the you can'ts are the U.S. and Israel and anybody who might be supporting us or hosting us with our military bases. Is that what's happening?
Yeah, it seems like it. I mean, certainly we've seen those stories. And the fact is the rest of the world now, including our NATO allies, to the extent that they remain so, are looking at us or the United States, I should say, if I put my journalist hat on and not say us, as an unreliable partner. And we know that they weren't, consulted in advance of this. And then the president says, OK, well, come and help us. And they're like, no, you didn't ask us about this in the first place. This is your problem. And that's true of Japan, South Korea, the members of the NATO alliance. It's true of Canada, Australia, and so particularly when you have Canada, Australia, the UK, and a couple other countries who are part of this, vast information sharing and intelligence sharing unit that we've relied on for so many decades now, back away from us. I don't think people realized, how critical this breakdown could be over time from a geopolitical perspective. And it also becomes an economic issue because the more isolated we become, right? We've put tariffs in place. What happened? China's trade surplus is $1.2 trillion, the largest in China's history. Is our trade deficit down? Yeah, a little bit because we're exporting gold to other countries that are hoarding gold. It's not because we're selling so much more stuff and winning the trade battle. It's because some of the exports that we have are for non-monetary gold, which central banks are hoarding at this point in time. And it, makes the number look better than it really is. So there's all kinds of consequences that play into this, not America first, but what really is turning out to be an America alone agenda that's not beneficial.
When we hear that phrase, taco Trump always caves, right? Is that right? Capitulates, whatever you want to say. Like, how do you,
actual, but yeah.
How do you and Chickens Out, how do you and your investor friends and colleagues talk about him off the air? I'm sure it's the same on the air, but like when you're talking to other investors, financial experts and advisors, he has this history of being completely unpredictable, which is the only thing that's predictable about him. And also a history of making threats and not following through. Sometimes he does, though. Sometimes he does, for sure. And
around, I mean, and not yet into the Stone Ages, to use his expression. It's actually the Stone Age, but that's okay. But we in Israel have launched an extremely serious attack on Iran, one that is potentially crippling to them. So they made good on that threat, and he might make good on another. And you brought up the word unpredictable. I've graduated from, one of the many expressions that I hate in my job is that markets hate uncertainty. We live with uncertainty every day. What markets really hate is unpredictability. And I think we've graduated in the last year and a half to an unpredictable environment. So I think that's where people in the business and the investing community are much more concerned about what's going on. Having said that, it's not like they're dumping assets wholesale because they believe, again, whether it's a taco moment or whether he doesn't make good on his threats like he did with the tariffs, and they're much smaller than originally, intended. People are kind of looking through these issues, assuming that the worst won't happen. It's a logical thing to do. The market goes up more than it goes down. It goes up for longer periods than it goes down for, during bear markets. And so it makes sense to a certain extent to shut it off and kind of stay invested, if you will. But in my mind, there's also a risk of a disruption that could last longer than people realize. If you go back to the 1966 to 1981 period where we went through Vietnam, the Arab oil embargo, a series of policy mistakes like wage and price controls, the Iranian Revolution, interest rates at 20%, things happen, and they can happen for a long period of time. And I think the one thing that people don't think about today is that the market can go sideways for a long time. You can have bull and bear markets that just slam back and forth for a period of years, and you don't make any headway, and you kind of get stuck. And that's the thing that kind of worries me most, is that scenario hasn't been contemplated, where you really just have to grind it out up and down. And that's true in the employment markets. It's true in the financial markets. And you just get stuck in this period that, is really stagnant and hurts everybody except, those who really have enough money socked away not to care.
It sounds like you're contemplating that scenario.
I am. And I have been for a while because, one, we haven't seen it for a long time, right? I mean, 66 to 81, again, we're spending more on Vietnam. We spent more on social programs, which helped to begin the inflation process. Then we saw, the Arab oil embargo in 73. We saw we went off the gold standard in 71. Before that, the dollar collapsed, wage and price controls. I remember growing up in Buffalo at that time in my life, and we'd go to Canada to buy groceries, probably not realizing that we were engaging in currency arbitrage. The dollar was just stronger than the Canadian dollar. So it was cheaper to buy groceries over the Peace Bridge, going from Buffalo to Canada. And so we do that every once in a while. But that started, 73, 74. Then you had policy mistakes. You had whip inflation now. You had the Iranian Revolution that caused oil prices to spike a second time in a decade. You had gas lines. You had shortages. These things can happen. We try not to focus on them or obsess about them. But I think that risk exists. It may be 25%, but it's still a risk. And it's still something that kind of I think about a lot.
How much do you think about every time we have a conflict with the Middle East, which is always, or how much do you think about just electrification and renewable energy, especially wind and solar and batteries? I was just in Amsterdam, as I told you, and so impressed with all kinds of things about their infrastructure. And, they like to make all kinds of comments like, this is what you get when you're not spending money on wars. But, China has spent a lot of money on defense, obviously, but they haven't fought major wars that cost $1 billion a day either. You can see what's happened to Russia as a result of their war with Ukraine. And I think overwhelmingly it's weakened them. I think it's fair to say, if I was really shorthanding it. But I just rode in a BYD car in the Netherlands, and that's the big electric car manufacturer in China. That car was awesome. I loved it. It was really cool for every reason. It also is better than American-made electric cars, apparently better than the Tesla for a lot of reasons. And so I just think about these oil and gas wars and investments. And I'm always reminded of Tom Ricks, the military writer and author, saying on Meet the Press before 9/11, I think it was, that if you want to get away from Middle East wars, then you should invest in renewable energy. I constantly think about where we could be, and I'm constantly looking at where other nations are as a result of smart investment in the future. How much do you think about that, and how much will that affect us now that it seems that they are able to compete? Renewable energy is competitive with fossil fuel in a way it's never been.
How many times do we have to go through this? In 73, 74, we knew it. And, by the end of the 1970s, during the Iranian Revolution, the Japanese were importing very small cars that had mileage, distances that they could go that were, well in excess of American cars. You go back to 73, average miles per gallon for an American car, 11.3 miles per gallon. And if you had a Cadillac, it was 8. Right? If you were lucky enough to have a big car, it was 8. Now it's 30. So to a certain extent, or close to 30, we're less dependent. But had we engaged, starting in the 70s, and Jimmy Carter tried this and was criticized roundly for it, if we had really developed solar and wind, and really more lately, and even modular nuclear, if we had put a lot of emphasis on, rebuilding the grid in a sustainable fashion and following what President Obama at the time called the all of the above strategy, which was carried out, not in either Trump term, but in other terms, people were attempting to, as Joe Biden did in his term, not a political statement, just a policy statement, to put up money for solar, for wind, for modular nuclear, to get away from a situation in which we find ourselves hostage to a part of the world that has been historically unfriendly. Now, granted, we don't rely nearly as much as we used to on Middle Eastern oil, because we're producing a lot. We still import, oil from Canada and so on and so forth. But the more isolated we become, and the more we move away from alternative sources of energy, the more reliant we are again on, petroleum-based products, and that becomes an economic problem. Look, China has solar panel fields that are hundreds of miles wide. I might be exaggerating, but I mean, enough to power the U.S. for a year. And we just skipped it. And we're taking down, windmills because presumably they either hurt birds or whales or both. I don't know which. And none of it makes sense. I mean, what makes sense is, we'll move into the future with our eyes completely closed on AI, but we won't move into the future when it comes to securing, alternative energies that can, help power the country going forward, well into the future.
Great points. All of them. Really important. All right. I will let you go, but make one final point about what you're watching or something I didn't ask as it relates to Trump and Israel's war and Iran and what you're watching at all.
I think it's the deadline. I think it's seriously the only thing that matters in the next 24, 36, 48 hours is whether or not he and Benjamin Netanyahu decide to go into a full-scale attack on Iran's civilian infrastructure. That will be a game changer in a wide variety of ways. And not to go like be a history geek or anything, but when Germany lost World War I and was forced to pay reparations and went into a deep depression even before the rest of the world did, that gave rise to some very bad things. Right. Most people believe that most historians believe now that World War II was just an extension of World War I. Right. So let's say we do bomb Iran into the Stone Ages, as was said, and we destroy their economy. We think these guys are bad. The Iranian people are not going to be in love with the United States and cheer us as liberators if we starve them or if we cause, an economic depression in their country. And that gives rise potentially to even more hardline factions that would come into power and, create the type of environment that's even less stable than the one that we have. So, look, a negotiated settlement to this would have been and still is the preferable outcome. Staying in the JCPOA, the deal that the president derided under former President Obama, was one that deterred and deferred Iran's nuclear capacity. All that would have been preferable to this. And so I think really everything that I'm looking at right now, all other things being secondary to this, is whether or not we go full scale and take the types of actions that have been threatened. That is, I think, a game-changing factor if it happens.
Sounds great. Happy spring.
Yeah. Hope you enjoyed the holidays.
He has risen.
Yeah.
Ron, always such a great pleasure to just be in your presence and to talk to you and to learn from you. I really appreciate you joining me today. It's been way too long. Let's do it again soon. And go follow Ron right now. Go subscribe to his Substack, which is great. Learn more. The Message of the Markets at Ron Insana. Of course, watch him on MS Now, where he's a regular contributor and always has been for a long time. And an American treasure. And happy birthday.
And thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, bud. All right. There you go, Ron Insana. How about it? Go follow him and support him on Substack and everywhere else. Thank you very much for following and supporting me. Appreciate you being here. Go subscribe or edit your pledge up if you really like the show and listen to it a lot at patreon.com/PeteDominic, or get a paid subscription at Substack. Write a rating and review over at Spotify and on iTunes, or rather Apple Podcasts. And that's it. Join us at Podjam this week in Vegas. Can't wait to see you. JonCarroll.org. Everybody go download and stream all of his music, and I will talk to you later and live and right here tomorrow. I'll be back, of course, all week. Appreciate you. Can't do it without you. Be the change you want to see in the world. Love you. Bye.
For the burning trees, you got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving wheels in leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. We got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. Let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. And even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up. Stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change would begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.